Welcome to E-Commerce Exchange, where we talk about all things e-commerce, as you might have guessed from the title. This month we are discussing SEO, which is a topic we've not covered before on the podcast. So joining me today, we've got eSideCo's Head of SEO, Will King. Welcome, Will.
Hi, Matt. Thank you.
Hello. And also our SEO Executive, Jack Stocking. All right, Jack?
Hi, Matt.
Nice to see you both. Thanks for joining me today. So yeah, we're going to be talking about SEO, kind of best practice, latest changes, perhaps some outdated practices that people are still doing that perhaps they can let go now. So I thought we'd just start with latest changes in the world of SEO. So what is it that online businesses need to know about recent developments?
I guess recently Google have been very active in releasing their algorithm updates. Yes. So from time to time, they make a change to their search algorithm, which is designed to improve the quality of the search results. Mm-hmm. But when they do this, the rankings for lots of search terms are shaken up. And when this happens, people go up and go down. And it causes a lot of traffic changes for many different websites. And Google have always done this, for 20 years. They've continually changed the algorithm. But definitely in the past 6 to 12 months, we've seen them doing this much more frequently. And we're finding every few weeks there's a smaller update which the community notice, but isn't as impactful. But it seems every month or two there's a much bigger update which Google actually formally announce, and they call them they're called core broad updates, and they don't really give you any guidance as to what these updates entail, but they always have quite a sizable effect on the rankings, and it causes lots of fluctuations in visibility and traffic for lots of sites. And that's a big change from where we were 5 years ago, where the rankings were a lot more stable, whereas today they're very, very volatile. So for me, that's the biggest change that I've noticed recently, is the consistent updates by Google and the often chaotic effect that it has on the search engine results pages.
So from an SEO point of view, does that mean that you're always struggling to keep up with and monitoring the changes that are happening so you can adapt accordingly and make sure that rankings and traffic still go in the right direction?
Well, I guess we're always monitoring our clients' rankings, visibility, traffic, and when these updates happen, for us it's quite stressful because obviously we don't want any clients to drop in traffic, and for us they never do. I think we don't really adapt to updates. Our SEO framework that we work by is designed to not be reactive to algorithm changes. That's not really effective SEO. If you've got a sound SEO strategy which applies the correct methodology and approach, you don't need to react to an algorithm change. If you do, you're doing SEO wrong. So our approach is to operate in a way that mitigates the risk of you ever going down in the rankings. Of course, that's impossible to guarantee because it's a separate entity, Google, that we don't control. But generally, we don't have to adapt to algorithm changes, and our approach to SEO is designed to mitigate that risk of dropping following an update. I'm sure Jack might have some other views on that.
Yeah, I think just backing up what Will said, really, we try to more or less be ahead of the curve rather than be chasing our tail. Because if we're being reactive to what's happening a lot of the time, then we're always going to be, not behind, but not the right word is, to be fair. We're always going to be reacting to what's happening rather than being more proactive and being, like Will said, our framework is what we've got to work with. We believe in that framework, so if we're always waiting to see what happens, then you can't really carry out that framework as much.
Yeah, I mean, if you do ever have a drop in rankings following an update, the worst thing you can do is react to it straight away.
You need to give it time to settle, yeah.
I mean, we've dealt with people in the past who obviously not our clients, but I've heard of websites who've dropped in traffic after an update, and then they've looked to reverse any recent site changes they've made, thinking that those site changes have caused that impact, when in reality that's very, very unlikely. And so that's why, making, impulse decisions to try and recover is wrong. You're probably going to create more mess for yourself. So if you do have a drop in traffic after an update, I'd recommend holding your nerve for days, perhaps weeks, gather good data, interpret it correctly, and then make choices from that. It's very rare that the cause of a drop is because you've changed something. It's much deeper than that with these updates. So yeah, we never react to them because we don't have to, and it's the wrong approach.
So can you talk us through any recent examples of changes that people might need to be aware of, people who are running online businesses, kind of changes that Google have introduced that could impact their results?
Not a very recent change, but within the past 2 years, Google have changed to what's called a mobile-first indexing system. And what that means is that Google will index and rank the mobile version of your site, even for desktop search queries. So prior to this change, it was reversed, where the desktop site was what was used for ranking on mobile. Obviously now we're in a mobile-first world, so that's switched around. So it's very important that all websites look at their site from a mobile-first perspective and not ignore desktop, but really focus on mobile, because that's what most people use when browsing the web, and that's what's used for ranking. So, mobile can't be an afterthought. You can't downgrade from desktop to mobile. You need to progressively enhance from mobile to desktop, because that's where your audience is. So for me, that's the biggest change that we've seen in SEO, is that transition from desktop to mobile being the most important traffic.
So your mobile site is no longer just a pocket version of your main website. Definitely. You've got to use that as your go-to version.
Completely, yeah. And we always encourage our clients to, think about their sites on mobile, not desktop, because the majority of your audience don't see your desktop version. They look at it on their phone. So if you're focusing on desktop, you're not focusing on the traffic segment that's most important to you.
And what about, more specifically, I was reading just the other week about a change that Google have implemented on the search results page to do with the featured snippet. So I don't know if that's something that would be worth people being aware of. Yeah,
so I don't know if people are aware of the featured snippet, which is usually the search result that appears at the top of Google, which is usually like a feature for people to see. And
that's in that box, isn't it?
It's in the box, yeah. So I know there was changes recently to, initially you could appear in the snippet and then you could appear in the search results below. And I think initially that was changed so that you could only appear in the snippet. But I think it's been reversed back, if I'm right in saying.
It has, yeah. There's a lot of discussion around that. I think the feedback from the SEO community was quite negative.
Right.
So Google are, I think, experimenting about the best way to.
Okay. So they rolled that out and they've rolled it back in.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually been rolled back yet, but it definitely was being discussed. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point of that was to increase the diversity of the results page, I guess, so that you would only appear once.
Yeah.
So what's the issue with that? Why are people upset by it?
Often the feature snippet doesn't get clicked on because it has the answer, there and then. Yeah. Whereas the traditional blue link in the search results is what gets clicked. So if Google give you the feature snippet, but then take you out the search results, you might get less traffic. Okay. So I think from Google's point of view, it was to deduplicate the search results to improve it for users. But yeah, the feedback was quite negative towards it, and yeah, they're definitely experimenting the best way to do that.
So that's one to keep an eye on for now.
Yeah, and we found that sort of change, and have you seen about the favicons in the SERPs recently.
What are they now appearing in there? Is that right?
It is, yeah. So
Can you explain what the favicons are to people?
they're the little icons, the tiny icons that you see in the tabs at the top of the page, or now in the search results, and it's normally the company's logo, a very, very small version. And yeah, recently Google have made a change on desktop that already was on mobile, which is where they display the favicon against each search result. Now, I'm not a fan of this myself, because what a lot of people think is it sort of merges the organic results and the PPC results, and it makes the difference between those links a bit less clear.
Especially on a mobile, I would say. I think it's quite hard to decipher sometimes which ones, for people who are probably unaware of, which ones are the ads and which ones are the organic listings.
Do you think that's the reason they've done it, to make it blend into one so the ads are more likely to get clicks?
I think so. I'll say it openly.
You say it. You heard it here first.
I believe a lot of Google's recent SERP developments, are designed to improve click-through rates on the paid listings and reduce the prominence and visibility of the organic results. And I think with the switch towards mobile being the dominant device, that's become more apparent. And the paid results definitely have more visibility now, particularly on mobile.
Well, in general, isn't it, as well as it being more of a crowded space on the SERPs in general, isn't there a lot of talk about Google kind of dominating it themselves, with a lot of their own properties getting clicks? If you go to Maps, for example, or if you go to YouTube, so there's less space for other online businesses to get searchers to click through to them, and Google are kind of diverting people to their own properties, or trying to keep them on the SERPs with things like the featured snippet and stuff like that.
Well, I think the official word of that is no. But that's the official word.
Yeah, that's what Google is saying.
Yeah, I mean, like Google recently are recruiting for SEO staff. So they actually have their own SEO team who apparently work independently from the search team. And the SEO team at Google, their remit is to maximize the rankings for Google products. So to me, if I was in the SEO team at Google, I'd be on the phone to John Mueller, saying, "Hey John, come on, sort me out." So apparently they have no special treatment, and they don't get any SEO favors. But yeah, I mean, Google do take SEO on their own properties seriously. I don't think the algorithm favors Google websites, but SEO is a priority for Google.
The other thing that I read about recently was BERT, an update that Google did. I think, in fact, you've written a blog about that for us, but it's probably worth just talking through what that is.
So BERT, yeah. So BERT was another algorithm change that Google made. I think it was in October. I can't remember. And it was, whereas the ones we mentioned earlier were more about trying to improve the quality of the search results, which made certain sites go up and down in rankings, BERT was more of an improvement in Google's technology. So making their natural language processing capabilities better. So BERT stands for something. I've actually written it down because I can't remember. BERT stands for Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers. What that means, I have no idea, I'll be honest with you.
That's what that means.
But in simple terms, what BERT did is make it easier for Google to understand the true intent behind a search query. And that's Google's long game. Whatever you search for, they want to give you the best search results.
So BERT's about the language processing and the searcher intent.
Absolutely. It's how they interpret the words in a search query and give you results that solve your question better. And as we use phones more, we get a lot of conversational based searches, which are voice searches, which are much different to normal searches because you speak differently to how you write, and people use a lot of pronouns in their voice searches, like the, it, they, and to an algorithm, it's not easy to actually understand what those pronouns are referring to. But the way BERT works is it uses a very clever machine learning, well, a huge machine learning system to better understand the search query by looking at the other words that are in it. So they'll look for the words that appear before and after certain keywords to make a better judgment of what this person is actually trying to find. I think an example in the blog post that we wrote was like two statements. One was the bow was tied, and the second was the bow was fired. So in both those statements, the word bow is used, but it has a different context. One is tying a bow, one is firing a bow. And what BERT should do is understand the context of bow in both those statements by looking at the words that appear around bow. And I think it works at the query level, so looking at the search terms you put into Google, but also at the document level. So when they actually crawl pages, index them, and try and understand the content on those pages, they can look at the text at a higher level using BERT and better understand what that text and content is about and is relevant for. And I guess from an SEO point of view, there's actually very little you can do to optimize for BERT. There's no BERT strategies, there's no BERT keywords, there's none of that. All you can do is create well-crafted content, written by subject matter experts, professional copywriters. It's got to read very well, written for humans, not for search engines. And if you use that approach, then I believe BERT should reward you because it will recognize the value in your content and understand what you're relevant for and rank you for appropriate searches. So in summary, BERT is very important for SEO, but you can do nothing about it.
I think that's a good summary.
I don't know if Jack wants to add to that at all, but that's what I'd say.
No, I think you've covered all the main points, really. I think it's just about making sure that your content is relevant and I think what it's trying to do is provide more qualified traffic, really, for what your search intent is, rather than sometimes it could be a bit misleading to what was before. If they didn't, like as Will's example was given, the search results might have been a bit more misleading, whereas it's more qualified now to give the proper context.
So make sure that your content answers the questions that your audience is likely to be asking.
Yeah, and I think BERT is the sort of thing that's very relevant to what you mentioned at the start of this podcast about techniques that don't work anymore. So when you think about BERT and the way it works, you're crawling text and using machine learning to understand the true intent behind a query and the true relevance of content, using techniques like keyword stuffing and keyword density, and there's all sorts of...
Yeah, well actually it's what I wanted to talk about next, was to kind of acknowledge that SEO is a very fast moving area, I guess, and because of that you can get, I think people sometimes understand tactics that are used within SEO but don't then keep abreast of what the new stuff is and kind of get stuck on the old ways. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about anything that you've come across, kind of old school tactics that people are still using that they should now move away from, and mistakes that e-commerce sites still make by relying on old, out-of-date SEO practices.
I think one of the main ones, like as Will just touched on, is definitely the content. Very thin content a lot of people are providing, so it kind of merges into what we just previously said, really. You want the high quality content that is relevant to your users that you're looking for. There's a lot of, like Will said, keyword stuffed content.
People still doing that?
People still doing
yeah.
that. And a lot of duplication as well is another thing that comes across quite a lot. So that's probably one of the main things for myself, is the content is poor really, and that's...
Content quality is everything these days of SEO, and like Jack said, you know, keyword stuffing, and not just keyword stuffing, but over optimization.
It's because people are always got in mind, we've got to make this rank, so rather than just writing for the audience, they're then writing,
It's like, pick a sort of a product you want to rank for, say cameras, okay? And so you write your product page, and you just repeat camera X number of times and all the variations of cameras to try and make your page overly relevant for cameras as a topic. It doesn't work anymore, you know. And you think about BERT and how sophisticated it is, you know. Think about the money that Google invest in their systems. I mean, I think they turned over, $32 billion in Q4 last year. So that's a huge amount of money that they turn over, and they invest that into their systems. So to think that you can trick their algorithms through forcing keywords in is ridiculous. You know, BERT is one of the most complex algorithms and smartest systems, you know, for natural language ever created, and you can't trick it by that. And again, like Jack said, that's what we see a lot. You know, clients come to us wanting to improve their search traffic. We look at their sites, you know, we audit their content, and it's just written for search engines. I mean, I think a really common e-commerce tactic that we see a lot is category pages that have a block of text at the bottom of the page, which is really, really optimized towards the audience they want to rank for. And yeah, that did work to an extent, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. But you know, it's 2020 now, and Google can see that content is so far below the fold that no user is ever going to read it or care about it. So if its purpose is just to try and manipulate Google into thinking your category is more relevant than it is, you know, it's just not going to work. And you know, John Mueller, is Google's, he's in their webmaster team. He said, you know, more than once that that's a bad tactic. It doesn't work. You know, don't do it. And that's what we see a lot of the time.
What else? What other terrible things still persist?
A lot of the bad SEO practices that were very common, you know, 10 years ago aren't the case so much anymore because Google came down so hard on it, i.e. link building at an artificial level and poor content. So obviously Penguin was an update that Google released, I think in 2012, which was designed to penalize sites who were optimizing too much through link building and other means. And Panda was, I think, 2011, and it was designed to penalize sites who were just producing poor content, essentially. And because Google came down so hard on those sites that were trying to trick Google, you know, over the years since then, I found, you know, those practices to be much less common. You know, Google was very good at just ignoring any sites that do that now.
So kind of weeding it out.
Yeah. So rather than, you know, having to deal with clients who are overtly doing bad SEO, what we more deal with is websites that just aren't thinking about SEO and aren't trying to manipulate Google into ranking them better. They're just trying to operate their business naturally, but aren't considering SEO. And what we find a lot of the time is very unhealthy websites with like a lot of technical debt and bloat, we call it. So they've got lots and lots of pages that serve no value on search to anyone, but they exist and they're indexed on Google. And when you have that problem at scale, it does cause problems. It reduces the quality of your wider websites. And we deal with this a lot now, where a lot of clients come to us, their traffic's dropping, they don't know why, and we audit their site, and what we discover is that a significant percentage of their indexable content is just really poor, and it's just legacy stuff that's been created over the years and forgotten about, but it's still there.
It's kind of dragging the site down.
Yeah, often it's like an anchor, holding the site back, and we often prioritise dealing with that, reviewing that content and making sure it's dealt with properly, because anything that can be indexed can affect your SEO. Yeah. So you've got to have a system in place to manage legacy content to make sure it doesn't affect you in the future. So to me, I think that's the biggest thing that sites get wrong in a minute is just managing their websites from a technical perspective and a content perspective, and not keeping things lean and healthy, and letting this bloat and debt to form, and eventually it will bring you down.
So Jack, what would your advice be for businesses who want to use link building as a positive tactic, and how to do it properly?
Yeah, I think that one of the main things that they can do is look at their own network they've got.
As in like a business network?
A business network, and we have a lot of clients who themselves or their business has a lot of clout, I'd say, in the industry, and they're very well known. And to put themselves out there more is an easy way, really, without having to do too much to be able to create quality links straight off the bat. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to promote now with some of our clients, is to use their ability that they have in the industry to promote that around.
So how could they secure those valuable links then within that network? What kind of advice would you have to them to actually then get good links back to their own site?
It's no advice as such, because I think whoever they're talking to in their industry would be able to provide a good link to them. There wouldn't be such a bad link from someone in their industry. So it's just...
Why would they link to them, for example? What kind of context would you... If I wanted one of my suppliers to link to me, or one of my customers to link to me, for example, what would be the way to encourage that to happen?
It may be something like they might provide an interview for them, or even like a podcast like this, talking about relevant topics in their industry. It can just be anything that's relevant to them, really. And it kind of works for both parties.
Yeah, I think Jack's spot on. Often sites have hidden link opportunities because there's people and websites in your network that you deal with day to day, manufacturers, clients, suppliers, and that's a relationship. You've got connections already, and often there are opportunities to turn that connection into some sort of backlink, and that's what we try and encourage. When we talk to our clients, we sit with them, we learn about their business, we learn about their story, and often through those discussions, we realise they have a lot of value in their niche, and that value can be exploited almost to secure backlinks. And I guess it's what we look for is, where are their connections? Who do they have relationships with? And those are perfect link opportunities, So that's what we try and encourage. And links and SEO go hand in hand. Links are important for SEO. You can't rank without backlinks. And it's a very misunderstood part of SEO. Because again, prior to Penguin, which was an update in 2012, you just buy links, and it was common, it was normal.
Just pay people and have them link back to your site.
Well, even prior to that, there were still issues with it, but it was common then. Lots of artificial link building tactics, and again, it goes against Google's guidelines completely, because the algorithm is based on links and networking. They determine what's popular, what's important, by looking at the link graph. The link graph, i.e. who links to who, gives them signals on, what websites are important, trusted, have authority. And if you start building links in unnatural ways, that's going to skew that link graph.
So it's about having the natural links. That's the key.
All
thing,
about
isn't it?
natural links, yeah. And it's about, as back to what Jack said, is finding those, or also identifying those connections that already exist within the business, and if possible, can they be turned into a backlink? We use all sorts of what we believe are ethical white hat link building strategies, i.e. that sort of thing, link reclamation. So if a brand has mentioned you, but not linked to you, you've every right to ask them to link to you. That's a good way that often wins you new link placements. And then we think more about how can we increase exposure for a brand through online marketing. What content can we create for this brand that their audience is going to find of interest and value, and how do we get in front of that audience to drive traffic to the site and almost do traditional PR, really, just get it in front of the right people. And if it's got value, if it's interesting, then those backlinks will come naturally. And this tactic, we do it again and again, and it works. And Google now are far too clever to fall for any sort of black hat link building techniques. You get PBN, which are like blog networks, which are again artificial. You get all sorts of weird link building approaches, and they might work for you temporarily, but then sooner or later your rankings will suffer. So we only encourage sustainable long-term link building, which is more about connections and relationships rather than just links on crap sites.
It kind of leads me on to my next point. I was going to ask you about, you talked about identifying when your brand is perhaps mentioned and then getting in touch with people who have mentioned it without linking to it. I wanted to talk generally about SEO tools that we use that you would recommend, but is there one, if we start with that, is there a tool that people could use to identify where they're being mentioned and then they could use that to know who to contact?
So there are tools, there's lots of PR tools that do that for you. We don't really use those tools here because for that very tactic, what we tend to use is just Google. So you can use Google search operators to find those instances. So a search operator is a command you put in the search bar which controls the search results you see. So there's a search operator called site colon, and if you do site colon domain name, it will return only results that come from that domain name. But if you put a minus symbol and then site colon domain name, it will only return results that don't come from that domain name. So we use that, so the minus operator, to exclude our target domain, and then we search for anything that's mentioned the brand name. So that way we can find any websites that mention the exact brand name that don't come from our site.
Okay.
And then we look at those, and that's where we normally find the link opportunities.
That's interesting. What about more broadly then, as SEO professionals, what tools and things do you subscribe to help make better SEO?
So for me, the best SEO tool in the world, definitely in the world, I'll say it is Screaming Frog. We use it every single day, and it only costs like £100 a year, something daft.
Yeah.
And it's such a useful SEO tool. It does so many things for us. I mean, in simple terms, it will crawl a website and extract information about that site for you to analyze. But it's got so many different tools and options and ways you can manipulate what it extracts. that for us, the uses are endless, and we use it every day, Screaming Frog. So for me, that's the best SEO.
That's your number one recommendation is Screaming Frog.
I'd agree with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when doing our migrations, we use it extensively.
So you're talking about site migrations when we're moving people onto the Shopify platform. So that's something that we do a lot here at Eastside Co. And obviously the SEO is an important part of that if you're moving somebody from platform A over to Shopify. So yeah, if we could talk about the migration process a little bit and why it's important and why you guys are key in that.
I think migrations are something that can easily go wrong if there isn't a plan in place, I'd say. I think that's something that we've got, which I think works really well for ourselves when people move to the Shopify platform, is having a set, almost plan of how we're going to attack the migration process. So we take it step by step. We have little checkpoints to go through on the way, and obviously everyone's site migration may be slightly different depending on what kind of site, the size of the site, etc. So it's just following those steps. Then it gives us like a base and something to refer to. I think that makes it quite a seamless process then to something that could be quite difficult, and if not done right, it can cause a lot of issues.
What can go wrong with the migration then?
Anything. I mean, if they're not handled correctly, you could lose all your search traffic, literally in a few days. It's that important. Right, okay. And yeah, we do migrations here every few weeks. I mean, we've just signed some clients that have massive sites. We're talking like millions of pages, and we'll be doing the migration soon, so that's going to be like a huge project for us. And as Jack said, it's all about planning. We audit the websites before the migration. We fully understand what drives their search traffic, who's their audience, what pages drive traffic for them, and it's all about just migrating that value across to the new site. And it's not one thing that goes wrong. The content could go wrong, the backlink could go wrong, like the redirects could go wrong. And yeah, as Jack said, it's about planning. We've got to make sure that you don't miss anything. So we've got like a 50-point checklist that we go through that details every step. Planning during launch, post launch, all designed to sort of mitigate the risk of anything going wrong. And yeah, it's a pretty extensive process, but it's absolutely imperative because what you're doing is trying to tell Google that this site has become this site. Transfer all ranking signals from A to B, and our job is to make Google understand that and recognise that translation in one go. If you don't do the right steps, then Google needs to work out for itself what's happened here, because they'll come to your site one day and it's all changed. You change URLs, maybe your content's changed, maybe your domain name's changed, your CMS has changed, and if you don't make it clear to Google what's happened, why, and what to do, it's got to work out for itself. And when it becomes ambiguous, that's when it goes wrong. So our job is to make sure that those signals are crystal clear to Google. And when you do that, you're fine normally.
Another thing I wanted to raise with you actually was something that's been in the kind of the SEO community a bit more recently, which is the concept of E.A.T from an SEO perspective. So I understand that it's not a new concept, but it's just been kind of discussed quite a lot recently. So I was wondering if you could talk through what is E.A.T and how it impacts people and what they need to know about it.
Sure. So E.A.T stands for expertise, authority, and trust. And it's a term that comes from Google's search rater quality guidelines. So Google have a team of raters all around the world who manually assess the search results, and they're given tasks like go in, search for this term, and review the sites and rate them. And the purpose of that process is for Google to essentially audit their search results. Are they displaying the sites that they want to? So for this process, they give these raters these guidelines which tell them exactly how to rate sites, what's good, what's bad. And in these guidelines, they mention this term E.A.T. And again, it's E.A.T. is expertise, authority, trust. And it's a concept which represents many different things that Google want to see in the sites that rank well, and also represents things that they don't want to see in sites that rank well. And that's where this term comes from. And it's caused a lot of confusion in the SEO community. Like, people talk about having an E.A.T. score or an E.A.T. update, which isn't true. E.A.T. is just a concept that encompasses lots of different things that Google look for in high quality and low quality websites. And that's where it came from. And since those guidelines were published publicly, and the SEO community obviously saw them, read them, and saw this term E.A.T. being used again and again and again, that's where this idea came from, that you've got to work on your E.A.T. And E.A.T. is not something that you can directly optimize for. And what we always say to clients is to think about what E.A.T. represents, i.e. expertise, authority, and trust. And how can you emphasize those three factors in your website presence? And it's about demonstrating that to users and making sure that Google's search algorithm can see it in your site. And it goes back just to bare bones SEO, having content that is written by subject matter experts. That's expertise, It's not having content that you've thrown together quickly to try and rank with just cheap investment. It's investing in your content so that it's of a high standard. Authority and trust, there's lots of things that influence those, but it's mostly, again, backlinks. Think about who links to your site. If you've got backlinks, that shows the trust. If you've got backlinks from trusted sites that you can only secure through being a good website, offering a good service, that's going to demonstrate authority and trust. And what these guidelines ask the raters to do is to look for independent signals of E.A.T. And that means signals that come from other websites. What's the general sentiment towards your brand on other sites? If you're an e-commerce site and they look for you on, say, Trustpilot or FIFO, if everyone is complaining about you and saying what a poor service you provide, whilst that's not a direct negative ranking factor, it's not a good signal. And that's a sort of thing that E.A.T. is about. It's about offering a good service and developing a good reputation online. If people are talking about your brand in a positive sentiment, you're getting links from high authority sites, and your content is produced by, again, experts on the subject. That's it. And it's important to remember that E.A.T. is just a concept that represents all parts of SEO.
Do you know of any kind of guide to E.A.T. that people could read that would be useful?
Funnily enough,
No, you've written one, haven't you?
I have, yeah, funnily enough.
That's right.
I forgot about that.
Well, I'll link to that blog in the description for the podcast, so people can read it. Because Will has done an excellent blog about E.A.T. where he talks about this in a lot of detail. Yeah,
and again, that blog emphasises the fact that E.A.T. is not a ranking factor. It's a concept, and that blog post in particular discusses, I think, 31 different things like e-commerce sites can do to improve areas that I believe affect what E.A.T represents. And most of it's just common sense, just being a good, honest website, offering a good service, you know, effective marketing.
I don't want to go all meta here, but does the blog about E.A.T increase the E.A.T of the East Side Co website because it's written by a subject matter expert?
Was meta a pun then? I thought you were going to say meta keywords or meta description.
No, just because I'm talking about the E.A.T increasing our E.A.T. I suppose it has, isn't it? Or it could do potentially.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we invested a lot of time producing that blog post.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't throw it together just, you know, in an afternoon. It took days to make it. And that's what, you know, E.A.T should be about.
Yeah.
You know, we are experts on all things e-commerce here. You know, it's honest, it's well written.
You wrote it. You're allowed to say that.
Yeah, and well, you proofed it.
I proofread it. Yeah, true.
So well written, well proofed, and
And trustworthy.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I would hope that it does, and it's, you know, I think it's good content for,
Yeah.
you know, webmasters and any sites. So yeah, I'd say so.
Well, I'll link to it in the description, like I said, and if people are listening to this and watching this, perhaps they can comment on the blog and see if they agree. Right, that was great. Thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. It was really interesting. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of E-Commerce Exchange. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, etc. And keep your eyes open for the next episode. And any comments below, if you liked it, if there's anything else you'd like to see, let us know. Thanks a lot.